Welcome everybody. We are now in Photoshop and I'm going to show you how to retouch this photo the way that I do. And I like to start out in Camera Raw. I think it's a undervalued tool. If you're not using it, definitely learn how to use it because it can do a lot of really powerful stuff. And then opening your images as a smart object is also something that I would highly recommend, so you can go back in and make changes later on. So really quickly, a few things that I look at is the color temperature first. Usually it's pretty close because they're daylight balance bulbs on the flashes, but I'll usually cool it off just a little bit. Let's say 51, 50. That looks pretty good to me. The magentas are a little heavy in this, so I'm going to back it off slightly. So a little bit better. I like to open up the exposure just slightly, so that's 0.15, and then I really spend a little bit of time looking at these highlights and shadows. So the first thing I want to look at is the highlights, and you can see, especially on the face, that's opening up the middle a little bit, which is kind of the goal. So we'll take that to around +10. Shadows, I'll take down maybe 5, and whites, there's a little more overall, so I'm probably going to do a little less, probably just do +5 on that one. And the blacks I'm pretty much going to leave alone at the moment, because one of the things that I don't like is if you start to get too crazy with the blacks, you're going to clip out your blacks, which isn't a great idea. The next thing I want to show you really quick in RAW is the sharpening technique and the ability to look at it and sharpen it. This image is pretty sharp. That's at 120. Let's get around. Let's just say right around 100 is 110. So what you're going to want to do is zoom in nice and tight. And then you've got all these sliders. Usually they're going to be kind of set for you, which is fine. You can turn that off. It doesn't tend to make a ton of difference to me. But one of the things that's really cool is if you hold down the Alt or Option button while you're sliding these, you can actually get a black and white view that'll show you what it looks like. So that looks pretty good. I tend to look at this radius and then I tend to drop the detail backwards because that tends to kind of ramp up some noise that I don't really like. And then the masking, you're going to go in. I like to get this just to the edges. And this is what I love about this Alt or Option click here, is that you can see exactly what's going on. So for me, probably about right there. We shot at ISO 200, so this noise reduction is irrelevant. We'll talk about that another time. Let's go back here and zoom out so we can see that looks good. I think we are ready to start. All right, so we went through Camera Raw and we are ready to start editing. Now the first thing I do, and I already did a little bit of it, is clean up the background. You can see over here I already have my touch-up layer, and if you toggle this on and off, it's just a little bit of cleanup over here. There were some spots on the background that I wanted to square away. The other thing that you really want to focus on in this particular type of portrait is the little blemishes. I'm going to show you how to take out some of the other blemishes, but I'm going to use a healing brush and just go in and start to clean little imperfections in the skin. So red spots, pimples. I tend to do things that either wouldn't be there, or when we enhance them are going to look really bad, because this is going to be a pretty intense portrait as far as lighting and stuff goes. So I'm just going to look around. Now, this isn't something you need to watch me do. I'm going to put this in a warp speed here for you, finish cleaning this up, and we will be good to go. Okay, so we're just about ready to go. But one of the quick tricks I want to show you is how to even out skin tones a little bit in case you have some hot spots like on foreheads or noses or something like that. And this is a cool trick that I learned, gosh, a while ago, but it's a good way to avoid airbrushing and kind of keep that nice detail in the skin while still fixing your tones. So I'm gonna do a new layer and we'll just call it skin tone. If I can type today, there we go. And I'm gonna select my clone stamp. And what we're gonna look at right now is these kind of bright highlights right here and maybe through here a little bit. So I'm gonna take my clone stamp and turn it to a blend mode of darken. And then I want to make sure that my opacity is right around 10%. You don't want it real heavy because it starts to look a little weird. So select an area that's close to the area you want to fix and just a little bit darker. So in this case, we'll probably say somewhere right in here. And then I'm just going to paint over this and kind of build that up. That looks good to me actually. And then we'll do this one over here. Just want to bring that down a little bit. And same thing kind of in here across the brow. That looks great. I want to also look at this. This color's a little weird, so I'm going to bring some of the color and the darkness back over. You don't usually darken people's eyes, but there's some color stuff here, so I just want to kind of go in here and get that closer. Then we can use the same technique and look at these shadows underneath of his eyes right here and right here. So I'm going to take the clone stamp and change it to a blend mode of lighten. And then I'm going to, again, select an area really close to the place I'm fixing. So let's say it's right about here. And then we're just going to kind of build it up. We don't want to go crazy. And we'll go under this one and just brighten it up just a little bit. Again, the great thing about this technique is that we're bringing some of the texture up and it's not having this really fake soft flat look like airbrushing tends to have. I'm also going to do a little bit over here. And it's really almost not even noticeable if you didn't know it happened, which is exactly what we're going for. So if I turn this off and turn it on, you can see that under the eyes especially is a lot darker. And then on the forehead, there's just a little bit of shine, and we took that down effectively. And that is using the clone stamp on a different blend mode. Okay, so the skin is clean and we toned things down and made them a little bit more even. Now it's time to get to my favorite part, which is the actual dodging and burning to get this picture really shining with the lighting that we have on it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new curves layer. And down here you're going to see I'm just going to take this up till it's pretty decently bright. It will look too bright, which is a good thing. And then I'm just going to invert that. So Control Command I to invert this mask up here and make it black. Then I'm going to get my brush tool and make sure it's really soft, so 0%. And I'm going to change the opacity to 75. Then I'm going to put the flow at 5%. So what this will allow us to do is kind of build the layers on top of each other as opposed to just having one brush stroke do everything, and it gives us a little bit more control. I'm going to show you in the beginning how I do it, and I'm going to fast forward through it because it takes a really long time, and that's the one thing that I would say with this dodging and burning technique is really take your time and make sure you go into those little areas and get in close and get in tight and get it clean. So we'll start up here. The forehead's pretty bright, so we don't want to do a ton. We'll do just a little bit through here just to kind of make it look a little more even. And you can toggle back and forth too if you're not liking it. I personally love to do hair. So if you've got these little like cool grays in there, then really pop them out. So we're just going to brush in a little bit of that dodging, especially over here. Maybe a little bit there. Maybe a broad one right there. Then kind of go into these little spaces. We'll kind of work our way down. I really like to pop out underneath the eyes just a little bit, so we get that going on. We'll go over the eyebrows here in a second. And especially stuff like this. So we've got this rim of the glasses. We're going to do the actual glasses here, pop them out just a little bit more. And again, we're looking for highlights to enhance. We're not looking to create false highlights, really. If it's a little bit highlighted, then punch a little bit in there. But if it's not, then wait a second, and we'll look at that here in a second on the shadow side of things. So again, I'm going to go across the bridge of the glasses, probably pop out the eyes just a little bit. I'll show you a little more how to do that later. I like to do around the eyelids. It's a kind of a look. You can decide whether you like it or not. And it's totally fine if you don't. I'm going to do those pectoral highlights. So I'll go in here and kind of bring those out. And same thing here and here. And then I think this needs a little bit. And maybe right here, pop out that logo. And then this is kind of a cool little highlight. So let's just barely put any in there. I love popping that kind of highlight out. Make the nose a little better. Okay, so I'm going to breeze through some more of this. Sit back and relax, and I'll be back in just a second. So we're done with the dodging, and we're going to move on to the burning section of it. Just to give you an idea, this is not, for the tutorial's sake, I'm not spending as much time doing the dodging as burning just because it would be ridiculously boring. But so you can see, this mask is pretty detailed, and that's the way it should be. You don't want these big, huge, broad strokes going everywhere, because then it just kind of looks a little bit muddy. But the nice thing about this is it really pops out details and brings things to light. So now we're going to go ahead and do the burning, which is pretty much the same thing as the dodging, except we're darkening the shadows now. So we're going to darken it down. It's a curves layer. Darken it down. Again, be a little drastic, and then go ahead and invert it. Your brush is still soft, set to 75% opacity with a 5% flow. And we're going to get in here and just start to build it up. So let's build up a little bit of darkness on the eyebrows. That's a really good trick to kind of pop in the eyes, is getting those eyebrows dark. Same thing with the iris there and the border of the eye. You just want to darken that a little bit, and they'll kind of pop out the color and give it a little more. Eyelashes, I darken them even on guys. I think it makes the eyes pop a little bit more. And same thing, look at these little great grooves. It really pops out the glasses. We can see some shadowing here that will look good. Let's see where else. And then over here, I'm going to darken this up just a little bit, because I think it needs to be a little darker to match the other side. So we'll start to darken this side of the face some. And that looks pretty good. Then over here, even don't be afraid to go into those shadows. Darken them up a little more. Darken up the nostrils. The mustache area is a good one to darken. And the beard really makes it pop. And since we brighten that skin area, it's going to help as well. So I'm going to go in, look around here, just sit back, and we'll go on to the next thing in just a second. So we've already come a really long way with this image. And if you wouldn't have seen it before, it's almost hard to tell, which is really the point of what we're doing. I'm going to toggle this on and off so you guys can see. This is our before, and this is our after. Before and after. And you can see it's really punching out those highlights, those shadows, and creating this really great depth and dimension for the face. So the next thing I want to do is show you guys a quick eye trick that can pop the eyes out but make them look natural instead of that weird kind of glowy look. So we'll do this from scratch. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to brush. Make sure you reset your brush. We're going to do a 60% opacity, and we're going to do 100% flow. And I'm going to turn on the quick mask tool so that we can see what we're doing. So we'll hit Q for quick mask, and we're going to zoom in on the eyes. And then I'm just going to paint over the bottom part of the eye. So we'll put it right in here. And same thing on this side. We'll go up a little higher. It's where you can naturally see the light coming on to the eye. So we'll go right in there. That looks good. And then we're going to hit Q again to turn the quick mask into a selection. Now right now I'm going to go back all the way out so you can see the entire canvas is selected. So we want to invert this selection. So we're going to hit Control Shift I or Command Shift I on a Mac. And now you can see just those little irises are, or the eyes I should say, underneath are selected. Now we've got that selected, we can use it as a mask. So I'm going to just click a curves layer. And here's the interesting thing. I'm not going to do anything to the curves layer. I'm just going to change the blend mode to screen. And you'll see that makes a huge change. And it really pops the eyes out. Just that alone, I think, is really heavy-handed. But then we're going to combine that. So we're going to call this Brighten. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another curves layer. I'm going to set the blend mode to soft light. And I'm just going to bring this mask up. So I'm going to hold the Alt Option key and drag the mask from Brighten onto there. And yes, I do. So now it's going to create a little bit of contrast, which is what I'm going to call this. So if you look at the eyes now, so there's before, let me zoom in a little bit. There's with just a screen, and there's screen and soft light. So you can see it's really popping out the colors and all those really cool little quirks that people's eyes have, which I really enjoy. So to get even more control over this, you could go in and brush them, but the easiest way would be to turn these into a group. So I'm going to select them both and hit Control or Command G, and we're just going to call this eyes. And then I'm going to make a mask on here, just in case you want to brush it out. But the really simple way to do it is really just turn the opacity of the group down just a little bit. 70% is probably good for me. And if you look at these eyes, they look more poppy and more colorful. I'm going to show you real quick off and on, off and on. And again, it's just designed to pop them a little bit. We don't want that really crazy glowy eye, but it gives it the nice contrast and the nice brightness that you want to have in those eyes so you can see the colors and the little individual specks and stuff like that. We dodged, we burned, we popped out the eyes, and now we're going to put the kind of final touches on it. Now I should say, a lot of times I'll do a little more skin work than we did to this one, but there's a ton of tutorials on skin, and if you guys want to look at those, you most certainly can. You can even use these dodging and burning layers to kind of pop out some of these dimples and things like that, but for this one, that's really not necessary. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the color a little bit to get it close before we start running any kind of filters or final touches on it. So we're going to, I do most of my color changes with curves layers. As you can see, I use curves layers a lot. So I'm just going to pop up a curves layer, and I'm going to call it color. And the first thing I'm noticing about this image is it feels a little red to me. So we'll go into the red channel, and I'm just going to pull it down just a skosh. Now you can use your arrow keys to get those kind of fine-tune adjustments. I think right about there looks good. There is also a little bit of green in the shadows. I don't want it to go too crazy, but maybe just a skosh. That looks good. And then cooling it off, I found tends to be a good idea. I don't want to go crazy with this either. Again, I'm just using my arrow keys to just nudge the blues and the greens and the reds around. So let's look at that really quick. We'll turn it off and back on. I think that looks good. Our background is looking a lot more neutral, and I'm looking at the colors over on this side, and they're pretty close. Yeah, they look good. So you can look over in your info panel, and it'll show you where the colors are. If you're having a gray background, you really want those colors to be about the same. So if it's an RGB, you want, say, red to be 55, blue to be 55, and green to be 55, and that's perfectly neutral. This one's a little bit on, let's say, the bluish green side, which is fine. And I like that. So let's move on to the next thing. So next up, what I do is actually run a filter. And one of the filters that I've used for a very, very long time is Topaz Adjust. So the way we're going to be able to use this is by bringing this all to the top as a new layer. So it's the kind of finger mash E, which is Command Alt Option Shift E, and that'll bring up a merged layer. So everything from the bottom is being merged up here. And I'm going to call this Clarity. And then I'm going to run Topaz Adjust. This is a really cool filter, and it's really affordable. I think for this whole thing, it's $50, which for what you can do with it, it's pretty impressive. So under the Vibrant collection over here is what's called Clarity, and that's what I tend to use. You can see it's pretty harsh on skin and on faces, which is why I'm going to do what we're about to do. So we're going to apply this. I think it looks good just the way it is. Don't worry about the background because we're not going to use it on the background. We're just going to hit OK. So obviously this looks like some kind of bad HDR portrait, which is not what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the opacity of this layer down to 65%. It's already looking better. And then I'm going to put a black mask on it. So I'm just going to hold the Alt Option key and make it disappear. Now is where the cool stuff comes in. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to get a 20% opacity, and I'm going to start to brush it into the areas that I want some more detail. So we'll look at the eyes first. We'll just do, I especially like it on the eyes. And then we'll do kind of a broad around the eyes. I really like this for hair. It kind of pops out those little micro contrasty highlights. Again, I'm on a 20% opacity, and I'm just kind of brushing this in. That looks good. You can go pretty crazy on the clothes. Actually, clarity with clothes looks really cool. Watch for moire a little bit, but the clarity on the clothes is really neat. So we're just brushing this in, do a little bit of the lips there. And then what I'll do is just do kind of a big pass across the face, like that. And that looks pretty good. Again, we don't want this to be super drastic, so I'm just going to turn it off really quick. And you can see the changes are really cool, but really minimal. It's really popping some highlights, popping some clarity, but we don't have that HDR-y weird look that I don't love. So that's our clarity layer. And now we're going to talk about the final color that I do on this. And that's the kind of extra sauce, if you will, the secret sauce that I use. So the way I do this is we're going to do another merge to top. So we'll do the Control Alt Shift E, or Command Option Shift E on a Mac. And that will get us a new layer up on the top. And we don't actually need to rename this one. So we'll go back into filters, and I'm going to use the Nik Collection Silver FX Pro. And just in case you didn't know, the Google Nik software is free now. Google made it free, so thank you, Google. And you can just go download it and have all these cool effects and filters that you can throw on. A lot of people use them, and you can make them do a lot of neat stuff. The one I tend to use is the High Structure. High Structure Smooth. I think we're going to do the harsh for this one. I'm going to brighten it up just a little bit. I'm going to take the structure down just a little because it's a bit harsh for my taste. And that looks pretty good to me. And we're going to click OK. So now we have this black and white layer. And obviously we're not making a black and white image. So what are we going to do with this? Well, this is what I do. I'm going to take this layer and I am just going to change the opacity down to 15%. And as you can see, it gave it this really interesting contrast and color. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to turn it on, off, and on. So it's kind of working to do two things at once. One, it's boosting your contrast a little bit, and two, it's muting the color palette of the image itself. Now that's the way I like my photos to look. So if you don't love that, you could certainly stop right there and mess with the color. But for me, I really love this kind of muted, almost gray color palette where it's kind of feels moody and mysterious. But that's what I do to get the color the way that I get it. One of the things that I'll do sometimes, this image is probably not necessary, but sometimes I'll just add a quick kind of brightening layer specifically to the middle of the face. So we'll throw a curves layer on, we'll call it bright face. Again, push that curves layer a little bit. We'll just get a 20% opacity brush, and we're just gonna liberally brush a little bit onto the face here and maybe down here just a little bit. This tends to kind of, yeah, pop the face just a little bit if it's gotten a little bit dark. But I think that looks pretty great. So I'm going to take you down to the bottom. We're going to do a before and after. Let's take a look at this. So this is our before, which I thought looked cool, but doesn't look cool anymore. And this is our after. So again, you can see the whole point of this is to really focus on those little highlights, the little shadows, and pop out the cool details of someone's face in the eyes, in the beard, not necessarily in the beard on a woman, but you know what I'm talking about. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I try to respond as quickly as possible. You can also head to my webpage at aaronandersonphoto.com, and you can get a hold of me inside of there from the contact section. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.